USCHO.com. This is the USCHO Weekend Review podcast from U.S. College Hockey Online at USCHO.com. A look at this weekend in college hockey and a review of the top news of the week.
Welcome to the USCHO Weekend Review podcast for Monday, November 26th. I'm Ed Trefzger alongside Jim Connelly. Well, a great weekend of hockey, although number one and number two had the weekend off, but we sure have a lot of different things that went on to talk about.
It was a great weekend, and I think that Thanksgiving weekend can kind of be almost the doldrums. A lot more teams are taking it off in these last 2 years than they maybe did 5, 6, even 10 years ago. But I think that you realize that it's a little break you can get sometimes in the middle of the season, and you know that when you come back from Thanksgiving, that is really the push toward that end of the first half.
Well, the premier event, even though it wasn't our game of the week, it was terrific. And that's the Friendship Four with Union winning the Belpot. And what a great weekend for the Dutchmen.
A great weekend for the Dutchmen and a great weekend for college hockey over in Northern Ireland. And I've mentioned on this podcast before that I got to be part of the first one when I was working the radio for UMass Lowell. And back then it was a great event, and I actually think it might have gotten better. And I can remember the plane ride home from Belfast that first year, and Peter Roby was then the athletic director at Northeastern, and he and Dana Skinner from UMass Lowell were pretty instrumental in making that tournament happen. And I remember getting off the plane, I was walking, toward the baggage claim with Peter, and I said, "Do you think you'll ever get one better than this one?" I said, "This is a pretty special event." He said, "Oh, I don't know if they'll ever be able to do it as well as they did this first year." Well, I'll tell you, in year 4, I think, having followed the teams on social media and having talked to some people, it keeps getting better and better every year. And when you're putting a quality product on the ice at the end of it all, and that is the whole thing, is that these teams have been there now for 5 days before they play a game, and they've done a lot of great things within the community, a lot of cultural events for them to get to see a different type of people and culture and just a different way of life, I think is special. But then you add in 2 great hockey games in the semifinals, 1-goal games. One was actually a tie between Union and Yale that was won in a shootout, and then the other a 1-goal game between Boston University and Connecticut. I thought that the hockey was top notch, and then a final that at 2-1, a Union victory, had so much offense in it. Believe it or not, I thought both goaltenders were phenomenal, and that really capped off a wonderful tournament. There were just so many great plays made in the course of the tournament. So I think the fans and the number of fans, 23,000 fans over 4 games, that's a pretty impressive number that they put into the SSE Arena in Belfast. So that I think alone is noteworthy. They're now calling it, the Belfast Giants they're calling it one of the most watched television events in Northern Ireland history. And when you consider the fact that it was televised on TSN in Canada, it was televised on NESN and ESPN Plus over here in the United States, it was televised on the BBC throughout Europe. I'm not surprised by that. That is, it's a true number, and the ratings behind it seem to be doing it justice.
You mentioned the goalies, shots 40-38 in favor of Boston University. That's one heck of an offensive display, yet one heck of a goalie performance, as you mentioned. Wow, big numbers.
Yeah, really, really big. And some of the saves were highlight reel saves. And I guess I can remember when we went over with Lowell, and maybe the hockey wasn't the cleanest, but there were moments in every one of the games that seemed to be, defining moments, playmaking moments, guys that just, you get into that situation, despite the fact that it's just an in-season tournament. It's a really early in-season tournament when you think about it being at Thanksgiving. I feel like the moment itself creates a different atmosphere for the teams, and the teams, believe it or not, end up playing at a higher level. I won't say it rivals a regional or a Frozen Four, but the hockey is pretty darn solid hockey, and I think it is because the teams just want to go home with that Belpot trophy so bad.
Well, kind of a sidebar here, picking up on something we talked about last time, offense and goaltending in hockey. And I saw a stat today that right now there are 8 defensemen averaging over a goal per, or over a point per game, rather. that is pretty terrific. And it reflects the change in the game. And I've got to think that right now, maybe I'm looking at it through rose-colored glasses, but I seem to feel like we're in sort of a golden age for college hockey right now.
I think when you come into recognizing the importance of a defenseman to the offense, I feel like this has probably been a trend that has been on its way. I'm going to say for 8 years right now, because 8 years ago was the first time I verbally remember talking about it and how important getting that back end scoring was. And even, just talking about the ability for good defensemen to transition to offense. And, half the time that can result in points as long assists up the ice that create 2-on-1s and all that sort of stuff. But I think that you've also seen defensemen working harder to shoot the puck and getting into these shooting bays and whatever teams call them. But most teams seem to have that now, where you can just work on your shot, almost ad nauseum. As many hours as you want to spend in one of these bays, you can sit there and work on your shot, whether it's the quick release wrist or the slap shot, all of those things. And I think that defensemen are learning that the only way that you succeed at the next level is to make sure that you go and work on your shot. And some of these guys are coming away with not just good shots, but quality shots that can be used in every situation. No defenseman is afraid to take a breakaway anymore. You used to think, oh boy, there's a defenseman on a breakaway. Well, that's an easy save, or they're just going to try to shoot 5-hole. The reality is these guys have some moves now that this, and it's been coming for almost a decade now. But I think that the ability of those defensemen to engage themselves in the rush obviously pays dividends to their teams, but it also makes them more prepared to go on to the next level.
Not only that, but also when teams are set up in the zone, defensemen are much more likely to cycle down low than it used to be. It used to be if you were broadcasting a game, you would talk about a defenseman pinching down in, because you wouldn't see the defenseman get in low. And now you'll see a defenseman cycle low and a forward cycle high at the blue line. It's the whole approach to the game has had to adapt as goaltending has gotten better. Offenses have had to get more creative, and it's just a ton of fun to watch these days.
And the converse point to that, too, is that most coaches are starting to coach up their forwards on how to be able to drop back into a defensive position and how to play a rush when it comes the other way. You've seen a lot, you go to a practice nowadays and you'll see coaches try to put their forwards in that situation. And so when the defenseman jumps into that offensive position, you've got some forwards that can actually go back and play the point.
And forwards blocking shots. I mean, the amount of shot blocks that you see is remarkable.
Yeah.
Anyway, so just a side note on that. College hockey is fun. We'll sum it up with that. Well, let's move on. We've got some other things. Our game of the week, Harvard beat Cornell in a game at Madison Square Garden. Huge rivalry. Final score was 4-1. That is not indicative of the kind of game it was.
No, it seemed like it was a tight game. That included an empty netter. But not surprising, these two teams seem to play each other each year, and all these games, for the most part, tend to feel like those rivalry games, really tight games that it's difficult to find some space on the ice. But good for Harvard, because this has been a team that, at times this season feels like it's about to break through and then has a good game and then it doesn't have a good game, and you don't exactly know what you're looking at. But Henry Bowlby has kind of emerged a little bit as a scorer. He gets the go-ahead goal when it was 1-1 in the midway through the second period. Then late in the game, he's Johnny on the spot for another goal. And then Adam Fox, we've talked about him so many times this year. He finishes the game with the goal and assist, but he gets the empty netter. So I don't feel like this was a 4-1 game. It really felt more like a 2-1 game most of the night. And the fact that Cornell actually scored the first goal, led 20 minutes into the game. There was some ebbs and flows to this game, but Harvard, good for them, coming out on top. A great crowd, 14,132 down at Madison Square Garden. That's a nice attendance for a game that's not a traditional game. Obviously, BU and Cornell will play every other year, and that's usually a sellout. But that's a very good crowd for college hockey to have a big crowd in a big city watching a rivalry that's really never been put onto that stage.
Well, it was an important sweep over the weekend for North Dakota. but it must have been pretty tense at Engelstad Arena at one point.
What a comeback on Saturday night. They're down 3-1 North Dakota. And, these games, they feel like, I don't like to use the word trap games all the time, but it probably felt like a bit of a trap game. You beat Alaska Anchorage the night before, and then you come out, just a sluggish start. They fall behind 2-0. They score one. Then Alaska literally gets it back 2 minutes later. Now you're in the third period. You're almost at the halfway point. Nothing is going on. And then you get a couple of power plays and you score 3 goals. It ended up being in 1 minute and 24 seconds, 2 of them coming off the stick of Rhett Gardner. One of them, highlight reel goal, made the USCHO.com plays of the week. And next thing you know, you've taken that 4-3 lead. I know that Anchorage hit the crossbar, I think, with about 1 minute and 10 seconds left off an offensive zone draw. It was a tight series, believe it or not, despite the fact that North Dakota got the sweep. That second game proves how tight that series was. And, North Dakota needed those wins really badly. And I think that can be a confidence booster anytime you can come back from 2 goals down in the third, win a game. That's a huge confidence booster, but they don't want to put themselves in that spot too often. They're not going to come back that often. We talk about this almost every week because there always seems to be one good comeback, but you don't want to be in that position too often. North Dakota, they're still not playing their best, but this weekend might go a long way to making them feel like they're playing better.
And for Alaska Anchorage under first-year head coach Matt Curley, I know it's got to be disappointing, especially giving up the lead like that. But this should be something for his team to build on, knowing that they went toe-to-toe with North Dakota in North Dakota.
Yeah, you'd hope. Coaches to coaches vary on how they approach that. Some would say that's a moral victory. Some would say it's still 2 losses. So you just kind of never know how each coach approaches it. He has to kind of understand the ego of his team and how fragile it might be right now, because it probably is a little bit fragile. And sometimes you need to just look at this as kind of like some of the rubber cement to kind of put some things back together on that team. And even if you get to take a loss and try to turn it into a positive, that might not be the worst thing to do.
This is the USCHO Weekend Review podcast from US College Hockey Online.
Well, UMass kept its roll going, and good teams find ways to win, and it's another overtime win for UMass over Princeton. That moves them up to number 3 in this week's USCHO.com men's ice hockey poll.
Yeah, and I think that the wins keep coming, it seems, no matter how you have to find those wins. I get it that you'd like to not have to go to overtime. You wouldn't want to be in tight battles all the time, but you're 11-1 right now. And you're 6-0 at home, which is another mark that they have to look at. This is a game that UMass, very similar to that Providence series a couple of weeks ago, takes a 2-0 lead really early. They get a couple of goals really quick. It was 26 seconds apart in the first period. Now you're kind of in that mode of, we feel like we're good. We feel like we're confident. But then, you get a good opponent. Princeton has proven themselves a very good team for the last 2 seasons. They chip away, tie the game, and then you get into overtime. And it does feel like Massachusetts might have taken some advantage of the overtime, really played well, 3 shots on goal. And then Oliver Chow, he's a fantastic sophomore. He ends up putting the puck in the net with 1:56 to go. And it's one of those games that you say is UMass, you say, okay, we got away with another win. We maybe didn't play our best. We maybe get out to that big lead, and then we have to kind of hold on. But they're finding ways to win hockey games. And when you're 11-1 after Thanksgiving, you'll take every win you get. It'll be an interesting couple of weeks in front of them. They only have single games against UConn this Friday, and then down at Quinnipiac, which will be a highlight game on the 7th of December. So we'll see how both of those games play out. But when you're playing well, you're playing well, and that's all you can hope for. And for a team that's an upstart team, if you will, this is more than an upstart start.
Couple of highlights in Atlantic hockey. Bentley had its first game ever against Boston College, and it was at BC. And I was checking in on scores on Friday and said, quick hopped on, listened to the last bit. of the BC radio broadcast, and certainly they were sounding very disappointed in that. But it's been over 2 years since Boston College has won a non-league game. 22 games, they're 0-18-4 during that stretch. And, you got to be concerned about what's going on at BC, and you got to be happy for what's happening for Bentley.
You do. I mean, it was a nice weekend for Bentley. BC is concerning, though. Now you're almost thinking about, because they're playing well within Hockey East. They obviously won the Hockey East regular season championship last year, and they're kind of right there in the middle of the pack right now. But you have to wonder, when is this not going to be a mental block playing non-league games? I don't know why it would be a mental block. It doesn't, it's not like an opponent. It's not like they play entirely weak opponents or entirely strong opponents. So they're saying, boy, we can't win this game, or boy, this is going to be a cakewalk. I don't get it. I just don't. But hey, Ryan Soderquist, his team at Bentley, congratulations to them. You go into a place that is going to be a difficult place to play. You got them on a weekend where there's no real home ice advantage. It's not like they're going to pack them in on Thanksgiving weekend. And you jump out to a 3-0 lead, and you hold on, you win 4-2. Good for them. That is what Bentley needs. This is a Bentley team that you've got a new arena. You've got some advantages that you maybe didn't have a few years ago. Now you've got to go out and start winning games, and that's the best way to do it. Go into a team that's been a perennial powerhouse that lives literally in your backyard, 10 minutes down the road. Go in and beat them on their home ice. That's a strong statement for Bentley.
Well, it was an interesting weekend for Robert Morris, a home-and-home sweep, 3-1 at home, and then 7-1 at Mercyhurst. It's not easy to go into Mercyhurst and when the Lakers have a fast transition game on their smallish ice surface. So a big weekend for Robert Morris, especially that lopsided win in a penalty-filled affair at Mercyhurst. A combined 19 penalties and a combined 71 penalty minutes.
You know what? I think that the biggest takeaway from this is that Robert Morris screwed their heads on straight after what could have been a really tough series against Penn State. To have to come back, you give up 14 goals on a weekend and kind of wonder where your team is and wonder what you have for a team. Now you scored some goals. You had a little bit of time to rest and put that behind you. And then you go into Mercyhurst and you play well against a tough league opponent, and you give up 1 goal per game. Now you've kind of feel like your defense is a little more centered, that maybe you can call that an aberration, that weird Penn State weekend a few weeks ago. And that's the way to bounce back. And that's the way to respond and prove that you're back. And I think that those 2 wins for Derek Schooley and his club, particularly the Saturday night win where you win it handily and you feel that you probably played some good hockey. I wouldn't be surprised. I didn't hear any of Derek's comments after the game, but if he calls that his team's best game of the year, I wouldn't be surprised, because you obviously did a lot of things right to score 7 goals and to come away with a 7-1 victory.
Minnesota State slipped 1 position in the poll to number 4, losing the back end of a weekend series with Bemidji State.
How about Bemidji? I mean, this is a team that maybe hasn't been consistent all year, but this is a team that I wouldn't want to play this team anytime throughout the entire year. It just doesn't feel like it's ever going to make sense. It's so difficult to beat a team that hasn't lost all year. Yet here at Bemidji, plays Minnesota State, and they play them tough both nights, end up with only getting 1 win. But I just love this Bemidji team. They've got some character. They get an early win in a tie against North Dakota. They found a way to beat Merrimack before they lost their back end 1-0. They have a couple of losses to St. Cloud State, and that could have kind of demoralized them. A 2-0 game that was a really close one, and then a 7-4 game that didn't feel that close. And then you come against Minnesota State and you realize, boy, this is a tough little slate of games we have here. You lose 3-2 the first night. You don't pack it in. You come back the second night and you win 4-2. So I just like the way that this team is playing. I think for Tom Serratori, this is kind of a good blueprint to make a good run. They're not. I don't know if they have any they have 2 non-conference games left against his brother Frank at Air Force, and that's it. It's all WCHA play from there on in. So they can start focusing on the real men's league, if you will, now, and those should be some good games coming up. One
other one we want to mention, we talked about in our Game of the Week podcast last Thursday how important a series it was for Omaha hosting Arizona State, especially having lost to the Sun Devils both games on the road earlier in the season. In the Friday game, a 6-4 loss by Arizona State to Omaha, and a fairly closely played game. Statistically, power plays the difference for Omaha. But then on Saturday, Arizona State outshot Omaha 44-23, yet were blanked 4-0.
Well, good goaltending goes a long way. We know that in college hockey. And right now, I feel like it's hard to turn a corner. I mean, this is an Omaha team that dug itself such a large hole. But when you can find a way to come back, and Evan Weninger was strong, obviously, on Saturday night, 20 saves in the first period, 44 saves overall. Those are good stats. But I also feel like there's a little bit of a turning of a corner. You hadn't won a game all year. Then you get an upset against Miami, which at the time was ranked number 20. Then you split with Western. Okay, maybe that's not the best, but you found a way to win the second game after losing the first one at home. Then you've got a team that maybe surprised you the first week of the year in Arizona State, and you're waking up a little bit and saying, okay, now it's time to play hockey, and we'll find a way to get some wins. And they did that. Like you said, a game that kind of went, kind of a little crazy back and forth. I think that Arizona State had the lead in the third period, and Omaha scored the last 3 goals to win that one 6-4. And then, like you mentioned, a dominating goaltending effort. So for Arizona State, this is maybe also a little bit of a character test. What did we just walk ourselves into? How did we not play better? Did our heads get too big? You can always say that about a team that's never been nationally ranked, and then they get that national ranking. So I think they are now 1-3 in their last 4 games. So they've got to get their game back together and get their business in order. So interesting weekend, really, that series became for both teams.
Well, one other thing we wanted to mention is a kerfuffle that showed up on Thanksgiving Day, thanks to an automated tweet from the USHL mentioning that Tri-Cities had the rights to Oliver Wahlstrom of Boston College, a freshman there. Why don't you take us through a little bit of what happened? And I know we both have some thoughts on it.
Yeah, and I wish it was as simple as to say that they had the rights, but the way the tweet and automated, again, as you said, it seems like it was automated from the USHL office. Sounds like Tri-Cities I guess I don't understand the rules of drafting and free agents in that league, but they got the rights through somehow waivers or whatever process it is in that league of getting Oliver Wahlstrom's rights, so that if he ever decides to leave Boston College, he doesn't want to go play Major Junior, he can go to Tri-Cities in the USHL. Now, what that sets off was adding him as a potential player to their roster, and then the USHL's system somehow tweeted out that he was added to the Tri-City roster. There's a big difference between adding somebody to a roster and acquiring somebody the right to ever add him, whenever it could be. And however it worked, I think it's a disgrace for the way the USHL handled that, and the way that just happened. And it happened on a dead news day when nobody's really paying attention. But then some people start paying attention, and suddenly interrupts your Thanksgiving. And, the school, Boston College, is kind of trying to chase this story of why is this happening? They know that this guy's in the locker room. He's practicing. He was playing the next day against Bentley. This is a team, Boston College, that's already lost a couple of guys that have decided to change their mind and go the junior or major junior route or whatever, and they've left the team. I don't like this, and I think that there was some irresponsible journalism behind it that causes it to become even more of a problem. But the whole thing just bothers me, Ed, to the core, and I had to bite my Twitter finger tongue because I wanted to just explode at the USHL for that, but I understand that maybe it's just an automated process. They're, kind of a lazy in the way they do things, and that's the way it comes out. But boy, did that cause a problem. And you have to understand that this is more than just a tweet. This is something that recruits that are potentially coming to Boston College see, and they say, oh, maybe I got to reconsider Boston College. This is something that Oliver Wahlstrom's teammates see. And they sit there and say, oh, maybe this guy's not that dedicated to us. Maybe he's been talking to the USHL. This could have nothing to do with the player, but it can absolutely destroy the career of the team. And I just think it's an embarrassment to the way hockey is run right now. We are in a cluster bleep of junior, major, junior, and college hockey right now. Nobody can find a solution, and this is just the end product of disaster.
Well, and let me address that and then go back to the press thing. It is a disaster, and part of the reason is there is such a competition for talent, and at the same time there is such a cornucopia. What I want to say, there's a bounty of talent. There's a ton of talent out there, and few places for players to go. So there's also the push there, and you've got all the problem with the, 12-year-olds committing, and I'm exaggerating a little bit, maybe only
Not
by
really.
a year or two. I mean, it's getting ridiculous. So yeah, there's that whole competition for it. On top of that, the way the media handles stuff like this, and I've seen this a lot of times. You've seen this a lot of times. Okay, so Wahlstrom gets posted on the transactions page at USHL, and automatically a tweet goes out, and then people see the tweet and other people retweet it, and then other people speculate on it, and then somebody reports on two different people's speculations, and then somebody puts together a half-baked article about, well, this and that, and maybe this and maybe that, and all kinds of speculation, and then somebody picks that up. It ends up being a whole much ado about nothing, and it is irresponsible. Now, at USCHO, we've had a tradition of really traditional journalism with our editorial staff. And if there's something that comes out, we're not going to just run on it on some whispers. We're going to seek out confirmation. And we didn't run with that story because we didn't get confirmation. And what we finally did get, obviously it's on Thanksgiving, so not everybody's sitting around in the office waiting for people to bug them. We got word from Boston College that it was a totally false statement. And, as it started to unravel, we found out. But for like 18 or 24 hours, this thing was running wild, like things were up in arms and falling apart at Boston College, all based on nothing.
And I don't remember the writer who was from the Hockey News that really got it going after the tweet came out, said that he had sources that said that Wahlstrom didn't want to play in major juniors, didn't want to play in the CHL, and thus was exploring his options. Well, come on. Like, these are 18-year-old kids. Can you be a little bit more responsible to make sure that you have your story straight? Maybe he is exploring options, but who needs to report that? This is a kid who maybe is a little confused about where he wants to go, and because he's a superstar, we suddenly have to just jump down his Thanksgiving Day dinner and pull it out of his throat so that we can figure out exactly what's in his stomach and his gut right now. Like there's no need to get this aggressive with trying to break a story just for the heck of it. And I really hope that Wahlstrom spends the rest of the year at Boston College, maybe spends 2 years there, so that you can shove it down the throats of these jack bleeps that don't know what they're talking about, or maybe do and just want to jump out, and they never touch the college game all year, and then suddenly they decide, boy, I'm going to talk about college hockey. They don't know what the hell they're talking about, and it's embarrassing.
Well, I there's nothing I can add to that, Jim. I'm with you on that. And you know what? These are young people, and I try to remember that myself and try to remind people, look, you're talking about an 18, 19, 20-year-old out there. It's not like somebody who's making $1.2 million a year to play hockey. They're trying to go to school and do whatever. So you're absolutely right. And I know no journalist that is in our circle is making 1.2, but whatever you're making, if you're a professional journalist, let's have some professionalism in this. Let's not try to be, look at me, here's my tweet. Let's be responsible.
Better said than me. And you didn't have to put bleep in anything you said.
Well, I'm glad we're on the same page on this. Anyway, Jim, I think that's going to wrap it up for the USCHO Weekend Review Podcast for November 26, 2018. For Jim Connelly, I'm Ed Trefzger. We'll catch you next time.
This has been the USCHO Weekend Review Podcast, a production of US College Hockey Online. Visit uscho.com/podcasts to listen or subscribe.